On the eve of my wedding, my fiancée dropped a bombshell. I was expected to sign over $1 million villa to her childhood friend. Matthew, Jacob needs the money urgently. If you don't agree, it just means you don't really want to marry me. She threatened to call off the wedding, and her voice sharp with entitlement. When that didn't faze me, her tone softened as she caressed her belly. Honey, think about our baby. Don't you want to give us a proper home? What a joke. The proper home she was angling for was apparently for Jacob. What a betrayal. I told her we should cancel the wedding, but she just cried and begged me not to leave. Ding. Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. The night before the wedding, at my bachelor party, I watched as Letitia Oziel, my fiancée, shared an intimate drink with Jacob Anderson. Everyone else was egging them on. Tomorrow you'll be stepping into the grave of love, but tonight is your last chance to go wild with the one you truly love, they teased. Yeah, come on. Matthew doesn't mind. Why don't you two make the most of it? I knew Jacob had been close to Letitia since childhood. She had mentioned him before, claiming they were just old friends. Still, the way they acted, I couldn't shake the suspicion. Trying to play the cool, trusting fiancé, I forced a smile. Of course, I don't mind. But the truth was, I gripped my drink so hard I thought it would shatter. My eyes never left them. I couldn't bear to let them cross the line. We'd been together for 3 years since meeting on a blind date after university, and I had thought Letitia would never go too far. But then, she hit me with a request that floored me. Matthew, Jacob needs money right now. Transfer the title of our villa in the city center to him. What? For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Even though they were childhood friends, I never imagined she'd actually say something so outrageous. It made me question everything. Were they more than just friends? Before I could respond, her expression hardened. What's wrong? Don't want to do it? Well, if you don't follow through, there's no wedding tomorrow. I was stunned, taking in the way she leaned on Jacob, their closeness. Jacob, pretending to be the good guy, took her drink from her hand and held her by the waist, turning to me with a look that screamed, "She's mine." Sorry about this, Matthew. Letitia is just playing around. She didn't mean it. I'd never take your money. His words sounded polite, but his posture spoke volumes as he was marking his territory. I felt a wave of anger welling up, but all I could manage was a tight-lipped smile, unsure how to respond. Our friends chimed in, making things worse. Oh, come on, Jacob. Letitia is just looking out for you. Honestly, if it weren't for that accident years ago, Jacob might have been the groom tomorrow instead of you. It was as if I didn't exist at that moment. The way they talked, it was clear I was just an accessory in this charade. Their mocking only mirrored what she must have been thinking all along. That was it. There was no way this wedding was happening. But before I could even get the words out, she moved in closer, looping her arm possessively around Jacob's waist, gazing up at him with sickly sweet eyes. I'm not drunk, she cooed, her voice soft but laced with venom. What's mine is his. Always has been. Then, without missing a beat, she marched over to me, her chin lifted in arrogant defiance. Matthew, did you hear me? Don't forget, your mom loves me as her future daughter-in-law. You'd better do as I say, or let's see how you'll handle the wedding tomorrow. We'd had our fair share of arguments, but I always chalked it up to the usual relationship drama. But this was a public humiliation. I wasn't about to take it lying down. I downed my drink in one gulp. Enjoy your night. I'm done here. I turned to leave, but Jacob followed, still playing his fake nice guy routine. Come on, Matthew. Don't take it so seriously. Letitia just cares too much about me. She'll get used to things. Tomorrow, everything will be fine. I could see right through him. His words were laced with mockery. Our so-called friends were eating it up. Yeah, Matthew. What's with the hesitation? Go grab your goddess. Don't just stand there. Matthew, are you so excited about marrying your dream girl that you've lost your mind? Letitia, all the while, stood there watching, not lifting a finger to stop them. They were stomping all over my dignity, and she didn't even care. I couldn't believe I'd spent 3 years in a relationship with this woman. Before I could speak, my phone rang and it was my mother. Matthew, what the hell are you doing? The wedding's tomorrow, and you're not taking care of Letitia properly? Do you even want to get married? Honestly, I didn't, but my mother didn't give me a chance to answer. Listen here, Matthew, the invitations are out. Are you trying to humiliate our family in front of everyone? You were the one who wanted to marry Letitia, so you better follow through with it. And don't forget, I'm waiting for a grandchild. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me baffled as to why she was so firmly on Letitia's side. Before I could process, Letitia chimed in, all smug again. You heard your mom, right? This wedding was your idea. You begged for it. Now do as I say and transfer the villa immediately. She said it while wrapping herself around Jacob, like they were the ones about to get married. I was nothing more than a clown to them. Jacob played his part to perfection, acting like a gracious saint. Matthew, don't mind Letitia's nonsense. As long as you two are happy together, that's all I care about. He spoke as if he was doing me a favor, making my blood boil. Sure, I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. We'll deal with the transfer tomorrow after the wedding. It's too late now, don't you think? Letitia's face darkened. How do I know you're not lying? Don't think you can fool me. I forced a smile, unwilling to let her manipulate me further. Relax. We haven't even registered the marriage yet. That seemed to ease her worries. She agreed almost too eagerly. Fine, I'll give you this one chance. But if you try anything, you'll regret it. Her intimacy with Jacob was unmistakable. Forget it. I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. I'm off to hit the clubs. She yanked Jacob by the arm, not sparing me a second glance as they strutted off. Looking back, I realized that my constant indulgence had given her the illusion that she could get away with anything. Jacob seemed like he had something more to say but got dragged away by her, his words lost in their retreating footsteps. I listened to their mocking voices fade into the distance and immediately dialed my assistant. How's that investigation coming along? Everything's on track, Mr. Aker. It'll go smoothly tomorrow, no worries. I ended the call and headed home. But just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard the unmistakable sound of my front door unlocking. I got up, and there she was, Letitia, draped all over Jacob. His neck was still marked with the fresh signs of her affection, a glaring reminder of their betrayal. Sorry, Matthew, Jacob mumbled as he awkwardly untangled himself from her. Letitia had a bit too much to drink. Can you take care of her? Don't worry about anything she said earlier. It was just drunk talk. As he rambled on, Letitia, not missing a beat, pressed her lips against his cheek, and he, without hesitation, accepted her advances. I snatched her from his arms and shut the door in his face, my patience hanging by a thread. Looking at her drunken state, I had no interest in her whatsoever. But just then, her phone chimed with a notification. Curiosity got the better of me, and I used her fingerprint to unlock the phone. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a message from Jacob. Letitia, just hold on a little longer. Once you're married to Matthew, we'll be able to transfer his company shares. For a moment, the room spun, and I nearly dropped her right then and there. So that's why she always kept Jacob close while dating me. All of this, just for the company shares. The villa transfer? That was just a beginning. I couldn't stop myself from scrolling through their chat logs. There were countless private photos exchanged between them, enough to make anyone sick. The woman I once worshipped had turned into someone I could hardly recognize, flaunting herself online without shame. I saved the evidence immediately, disgusted with myself for ever thinking she was worth it. As I was forwarding the chat logs, I heard Letitia's voice, low and slurred. Babe, what are you doing? I want more. Let's go again. Okay? Her voice snapped me out of any lingering guilt I might have had for going through her phone. The reality of what she was had shattered any doubts I once had. The irony hit me hard. Despite living under the same roof, I had never crossed the line with her. I was a normal guy, of course I had desires, But Letitia had insisted that we wait until our wedding night, and I respected her for that. I thought marriage was a given, so I waited. But now, it was clear that Letitia had probably been fooling around with Jacob for who knows how long, and I was the fool. Once I saved everything I needed, I couldn't stop thinking about what Jacob had said. I checked her other apps to piece together her real intentions. That's when she threw herself into my arms, making it hard not to shove her away in disgust. I barely held it together. Looking down at her phone again, I noticed another notification. Letitia, are you sure you want to go through with this? It's risky. If Matthew finds out, you won't get a single thing. This message was a surprise. I would have expected Letitia's friends to be fully on her side, not offering warnings like this. But when I scrolled further, I realized this wasn't a friend, but it was her lawyer. Letitia had been consulting him about how to secretly transfer marital assets. The more I read, the more shocked I became. They had planned everything down to the last detail, and yet Jacob had been completely at ease leaving Letitia with me. Was he not afraid of me catching on? I see now. To them, I was nothing more than a pawn. For nearly 3 years, they'd been scheming under my nose without being caught. Of course, they wouldn't care about one final night. I couldn't help but let out a laugh. Seriously, this has got to be the most ridiculous man I've ever seen. Matthew, what are you doing holding on to me? Who gave you permission to get handsy? Get lost. Even in her half-conscious state, Letitia's immediate reaction upon seeing me was to hurl insults. I quickly let go of her and shoved her phone back into her hands. She slipped and hit the ground, instantly sobering up. Yet even then, she didn't think she was at fault and kept picking at me. Matthew, what's wrong with you? Couldn't even catch me? If you don't want to get married, just say so already. In the past, I'd have kicked her out of my house without hesitation. But now, I had all the evidence I needed, and tomorrow's wedding was still going ahead. After all, I wouldn't want to miss the show. Don't worry, the wedding will go on just fine, I muttered, teeth clenched. Of course, Letitia missed the venom in my tone, still parading around like a queen. Good. Now help me up and make me some honey water. If the maid weren't off, and if I didn't need her to show up tomorrow, I'd leave her to rot. As she drifted back to sleep, I couldn't resist flipping through her phone again. Nothing this time. Clearly, to Jacob, she was nothing more than a pawn to be used. Still, one thing puzzled me. Why on earth was my mom so taken with Letitia? She wasn't even close to being a good match for our family. I thought about it for a moment before brushing it off. Probably just my mom's desperation for a grandchild. The next morning, the makeup artist arrived early, but Letitia was having none of it, still lounging in bed and bossing me around. This time, though, with the maid back, I didn't have to lift a finger. I knew Letitia, even for Jacob, would go through with this wedding performance. She might cause a fuss, but in the end, she'd play her part. I didn't care about starting on time, anyway. When we arrived at the hotel, it was packed with guests. Jacob, standing next to Letitia, was dressed even more sharply than me, like the real groom. In the past, I might have thought he was madly in love with her to go that far. Now I knew better. Letitia's only value to him was in how he could use her. Matthew, the bride looks stunning today. You better count your blessings, Jacob called out, but before I could respond, Letitia's friends jumped in with their snide remarks. Of course she's beautiful. Some people should really consider if they're worthy. You're so lucky to marry Letitia. You must have prayed to the gods. Exactly. I didn't bother to argue this time, just nodded along, which only made them mock me more enthusiastically. Meanwhile, Letitia was glued to Jacob, the two exchanging flirty looks, completely ignoring me. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and greet Timothy. My mother suddenly barked, surprising me with her overly warm tone toward Letitia's father. Now this was odd, but of course I couldn't neglect him. Yet before I could move, my mom had already made her way to Timothy, her expression almost shy. I blinked in disbelief, quickly glancing at my father. He was, as always, gazing at my mom with his usual devotion. Maybe I was just overthinking things. The wedding proceeded as planned. When Timothy placed Letitia's hand in mine, I distinctly heard my mother gasp in delight. Why was she so pleased with this match? Lost in thought, I barely registered Letitia's next complaint. Matthew, don't forget our deal. You're the one who's lucky to be marrying me. Don't worry, I won't forget, I said, guiding her toward the parents. Let's welcome the newlyweds. May they live happily ever after. Now, let's all witness their love story together, the MC declared as the big screen lit up. At first, it was just a few photos of Letitia and me pieced together in a slideshow. The applause from the crowd was scattered at best. I shot a look at my assistant in the distance, giving her a signal. Meanwhile, Letitia was basking in her moment. Matthew, let me tell you, marrying me is the best thing that'll ever happen to you. You should be grateful. There won't be a second chance if you mess this up. She trailed off, realizing something was wrong with the crowd's reaction. When she looked up, her face drained of color. The screen had switched to something else. Intimate photos of Letitia and Jacob taken inside a car, no less. What the hell? Weren't they just friends? Pulling this stunt at the wedding? Jacob's got some nerve. Who knows how many guys Letitia's been with? Disgusting. The whispers reached my ears, and once I saw that everyone had gotten a clear view, I immediately dropped Letitia's arm. Letitia, I had no idea you were this kind of person. I'm done. This wedding is off. You can go be with Jacob. I turned on my heel and left her standing there alone. Timothy Oziel rushed up to me, head bowed in apology. I'm so sorry, Matthew. This is all my fault for not raising her right. Please accept my apology. I wasn't interested in their groveling. They were all in on this mess. Letitia, initially stunned, suddenly became defiant. What? Matthew, don't forget. You begged me to marry you. You can't just call it off now. Before she could finish, Timothy slapped her across the face. A sharp smack echoed through the room. Dad, what are you doing? Apologize to Matthew. Now, look at what you've done. How could you embarrass us like this? Letitia's eyes instinctively searched for Jacob, but I had already noticed that he bolted the moment those pictures appeared. No way he was sticking around to be humiliated. As Letitia realized this, her face twisted in panic. She pushed past her father, running out barefoot, heels abandoned behind her. I watched her go, unable to suppress a chuckle. Clearly, she was madly in love with Jacob. And me? I was just a pawn in her little game. The murmurs around me grew louder. I knew from today on people would label me as the poor fool with the cheating bride. But what I didn't expect was for Timothy to drop to his knees in front of everyone. Matthew, this is all my fault. Please, I'll make sure you're compensated. I sighed, feeling a strange mix of pity and exhaustion. Before I could help him up, my mother beat me to it, pulling him to his feet and soothing him. This isn't entirely your fault. Matthew must also take responsibility. I'll have him go after Letitia and bring her back so the wedding can continue. Anita, if not for my father's scolding, I could almost guess the outrageous things my mother would say next. Despite the situation, she still wanted the wedding to continue. What exactly she was aiming for? I was previously puzzled, but now noticed her unusual attention toward Timothy. Suddenly, a ridiculous suspicion struck me. Could she and Timothy? As I was pondering, I was abruptly nudged by my mother. What are you doing standing here? Didn't I tell you to go after Letitia? What if something happens to her, a young girl? Hurry up. You're a grown man. Shouldn't you be a bit more tolerant? I was at a loss for words. When I turned to look at my father's carefully hidden glance, I realized things probably weren't as simple as they seemed. Regardless, I didn't want to stay here any longer. I turned around and left. As I passed by the guests, I overheard their mocking laughters. How embarrassing. Such a serious betrayal. Who knows how many plays this woman has had? This man is really a doormat. Absolutely. I heard that Matthew chased and pleaded to marry Letitia. I didn't realize I had ever been so lowly. When we decided to get married, it was just the natural progression of things plus our parents' urging. If I knew that Letitia was this kind of a person, I would never have married her. I saw them discussing fervently, and I willingly joined in. Is that so? I didn't know that. But I do have a video clip of Letitia and Jacob. Would you all like to see it? Just one sentence made them all change color instantly, and they left as quickly as they could. I let out a light chuckle and quickly leave. To me, leaving Letitia is nothing more than shedding a burden. Could it be that they really believe I like Letitia that much? If it weren't for wanting to spare Letitia an embarrassment, I wouldn't even have dragged things until today at our wedding to make it clear to her. I saunter out only to see Letitia clinging onto Jacob's arm, speaking in a submissive tone. Jacob, I didn't expect Matthew to have those pictures either. I can swear it wasn't me who spread them. Can we be together from now on? Is that okay? Jacob's face darkened, shaking off Letitia's arm abruptly. You've embarrassed me today, and you still want to be with me? On what grounds? Don't forget our prior agreement that you would marry Matthew for his 30% share and that $1 million villa. Immediately go back and apologize to Matthew? Did you hear me? Jacob's righteous tone nearly made me break out in applause. He had taken advantage of others to the extreme level. Obviously, Letitia didn't expect Jacob to have this attitude. She paused, her eyes suddenly red, and she attempted to reach for Jacob's hand again. There is no way back for me. The two of us together can slowly gain everything. I have given you everything. Would you please marry me? What a melodramatic scene. As for Jacob, he was not going to humor Letitia any longer, and took immediate action. Get out. Why should I marry you? You, of all women, are an embarrassment. Letitia was pushed to the ground, disbelief written all over her face as she looked at Jacob, finally realizing the authentically heartless nature of the one she had trusted. She whimpered quietly. The show had reached its finale. That's when I leisurely made my entrance. My, all over so soon? But don't worry, this matter isn't settled yet. I certainly wasn't planning to let them off easy. Jacob's face paled significantly, and he swiftly averted his gaze. Mr. Aker, you're mistaken. Letitia has been the one clinging on to me all this while. I have no ties with her. You don't need to transfer the villa to me. I have absolutely no interest in your things. Matthew, don't lay a finger on Jacob. I am responsible for everything. I will bear the consequences. Who knew Letitia could be so devoted? I scoffed. She heard me loud and clear, and her face went white as a sheet. But this time no one rushed to help her. I had no intention of wasting more time on them. Fine, I'll leave this to my lawyer. If you know what's good for you, you'd better return everything I ever gave you. Over the years, I had showered her with gifts, designer brands, a fully paid apartment. And now it felt like all that effort had been wasted. As I turned to leave, Jacob was already gone, leaving Letitia crying harder than ever. On my way to the garage, I ran into an unexpected visitor where a woman blocking my path. Mr. Aker, sorry to bother you, but I have something I'd like to discuss. I didn't know who she was, so I cut her off. Not interested. Mr. Aker, you're short a bride, and I'm short a groom. We've got a venue right here. How about we get married? What? I blinked in shock. I certainly didn't expect such a bold proposal from a stranger in sunglasses, standing in an underground garage. Not interested, I replied. I'll give you $1 billion. Marry me? Excuse me? For a moment I thought I misheard. $1 billion just like that? Who is this woman? Can she even back up such an outrageous claim? Before I could react, she scribbled out a check and shoved it into my hand, taking off her sunglasses. This is important. I'm serious, and I'm definitely not a scammer. Only then did I realize that this woman was none other than the triple award-winning actress, Belinda. No wonder she could casually throw out $1 billion. Still, wouldn't her fans revolt if they found out she was getting married so casually? I'm sorry, I can't agree to this. You have to tell me why. Before she could answer, a commotion echoed from the entrance, and before I knew it, she had already climbed into my car and slammed the door shut. Then, Several large men stormed over and demanded, "Did you see a woman in sunglasses?" "Yeah." I pointed in a random direction. "She went that way." The leader frowned. "Who are you? Why are you here? You must be with her. Let me search your car." That made my blood boil. "Who do you think you are? Why would you search my car? I'm today's groom. My fiancée cheated on me. You can ask anyone here." My shout was enough to make them shut up. No one would mess with a guy in my situation. They quickly apologized and backed off. It wasn't until I confirmed they had left that I finally opened the car door. "All right, you can leave now. Don't worry, I won't tell them." I had just wanted to take a breather in the garage before going back to deal with the mess inside. But to my surprise, Belinda was still there, standing her ground. "I know what just happened. I'm willing to be your bride," she blurted out. "Honestly, my dad's been pushing me into an arranged marriage. Those people earlier were here to drag me back. He doesn't want me staying in the entertainment industry anymore. But I want my freedom." I nearly burst out laughing. How could someone like Belinda, who had been in the entertainment business for so long, still be so naive? Did she really think marrying me would set her free? I highly doubted it. "Stop it. I don't have time for this. I've got bigger problems to handle." I turned to leave, but before I knew it, Belinda grabbed my arm and leaned into me, snapping a quick photo. She wasted no time posting it to her social media. With millions of followers, I couldn't even begin to imagine the chaos that would ensue, especially considering my wedding was canceled today because Letitia had cheated on me with Jacob. If Belinda's post went viral, it'd make me look like a scoundrel too. "Delete that photo right now. You're violating my privacy." "Relax," she replied, showing me her phone. My face was blurred out. The caption, "Love at first sight. He's the one." Even though I knew she was just messing around, my heart skipped a beat. This was Belinda, a triple award-winning actress, after all. But I quickly reminded myself that I was being used as a pawn. I walked away, trying to escape the situation, but she caught my arm again. "Can I at least have your contact info? If today's not a good time, we can meet up later." Her playful smile was hard to resist, and before I knew it, we'd exchanged numbers. This time, I left without looking back. Still, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder one last time to see her waving goodbye. Oddly enough, that small gesture lifted my mood a little. Even though I had orchestrated everything today to expose Letitia's affair, I'd still invested emotions in her. But as I walked back into the wedding hall, I was greeted by my mother's scolding. "I told you to bring Letitia back. Do you realize how this will ruin her reputation? She'll never get married now. Are you going to take responsibility?" Before she could finish, Timothy cut in. "You can't blame Matthew for this. Letitia brought it on herself." But my mother was relentless, even apologizing to Timothy as my own father stood there, stone-faced. Thankfully, the guests had all left, or this scene would have been even more ridiculous. If they weren't willing to cut ties, I'd be the bad guy. "Mom, if you like him so much, why don't you just divorce Dad and marry him? After all, he was your first love, right? We could all make it work." My words turned both my mother and Timothy pale. My mom immediately denied it. "Matthew, what are you saying? I'm your mother." "Oh, really? Then tell me whose photo you've been hiding in your phone case." For a brief moment, she looked flustered, her hand instinctively covering her phone. But my father was faster, snatching it away. The case fell, revealing a photo of her and Timothy in their youth. My dad was trembling as he held the picture. "All these years, I thought you'd moved on." It was the first time I'd seen my father's eyes well up with tears, and I didn't know what to feel. Then I heard the sound of a lighter flicking on. "I'll burn it now, and we can pretend this never happened." The pain in his voice was undeniable. I never thought he could love my mother so deeply. It was only now that I realized why she'd been so fixated on me marrying Letitia. It wasn't about me. It was because Letitia was her first love's daughter. But just when I thought it was over, my mother, in her heels, lunged for the photo, snatching it back just before the flames touched it. "It's not over," she declared, clutching it tightly. I still love him. Anita, Timothy spoke softly. That was a long time ago. Letitia stormed in, overhearing the confession, her face twisted with rage. So that's why my mom spiraled into depression and took her own life. She lunged, but Timothy shielded my mother, and chaos erupted. I never expected things to get this out of hand. My father sighed deeply, stepping forward. Enough. We're getting divorced. The wedding's off. I'll have the papers sent over. Go find your own happiness. With that, my mother abandoned Timothy, rushing toward my dad, but he pushed her away. She fell hard. Watching all of this unfold, I felt a storm of emotions. I had found that photo by accident years ago and had always thought Timothy looked familiar. I'd taken a gamble today, and it had paid off. As I stood there in shock, my father called to me. Matthew, let's go home. Your life is yours to decide now. All right. A weight lifted from my shoulders. But as I turned to leave, Letitia rushed over, crying desperately. Matthew, please, I didn't know about them. I'm a victim too. Jacob seduced me. Please, give me another chance. We were so good together. Good together? What a joke. Enough. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. I pushed her away and walked out, hearing her sobs behind me. But I didn't believe for a second that she was genuinely heartbroken. She was just upset about losing her ticket to a better life. As we left, I tried to explain the photo to my father, but he just patted my shoulder. Let's go home. And then, out of nowhere, I heard a familiar voice. You're back. I turned to see Belinda, standing there with a bright smile. What are you still doing here? My father, unfamiliar with Belinda, looked at me in confusion. I knew he had misunderstood the situation, so I quickly explained. There was a little incident earlier, that's all. Sir, I've fallen for Matthew at first sight. I like him and I want to pursue him. Here's my resume. I was speechless. Who in their right mind carries a resume around? My father's jaw dropped. Wait, you're a celebrity? What could you possibly see in my son? He just got cheated on. Leave it to my dad to have no filter. Belinda laughed. Sir, I'm an actress. Love doesn't follow logic. No wonder she's an actress. Her sweet talk is so effortless that I almost believed it. She was chatting away with my dad, both of them completely engaged, while I played the role of the driver in front. Where to? I'll give you a ride. Of course. I'm heading to your place. When I heard her say that, I nearly lost control and slammed down the accelerator. What? Why, don't you want me to come, sir? I'm in a bit of trouble and could really use a place to stay for the night. Of course you can stay. Before I could say a word, my dad had already agreed enthusiastically. I had no choice but to drive home, and my mind racing as I tried to stay calm. It wasn't until we pulled into the gated community that I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Watching my dad get out of the car, I immediately turned to her. What's going on? Spill it. I'm so sorry. I really just need to crash for one night. I promise I won't be a bother. That post on Twitter went viral, and my house is swarmed with paparazzi. I really have no other option. Her tone was so pitiful that I couldn't help but nod in agreement as I started tidying up her room. But just half an hour later, I received a call from my assistant. Mr. Aker, bad news. You've been spotted by paparazzi and are trending. Rumors are flying, and our stock price is crashing. As I processed this, it dawned on me. I was being painted as the two-timing villain. My true identity exposed, with the story twisted to suggest that I framed Letitia just to be with Belinda. How ridiculous. I'm sorry, Matthew. I'll handle it. We're filing a lawsuit immediately. Belinda received the news too and quickly sent her apologies, trying to make amends. As I read her message, I couldn't help but notice one of the companies involved was Jacob's little venture. I hadn't even planned to deal with him, yet here he was, practically delivering himself to my doorstep. Since he wanted to play, I was more than willing to oblige. It's fine. I can handle this. I immediately called my lawyer, exposing everything Letitia and Jacob had done. Thankfully, I had kept all the evidence. It was finally paying off. The private photos from their wedding had circulated quietly, but with Belinda's recent boost, they were now utterly disgraced, even tangled in legal issues. Ha! Serves them right. Once I had everything under control, I got another call from my assistant. What's up? More bad news. Mr. Aker, can I ask, is Belinda really planning to pursue you? Do we need to market this? What? I was completely dumbfounded. I opened Belinda's social media and was stunned to see her openly declaring her feelings for me in front of her millions of followers. I turned to her, bewildered. Have you lost your mind? I'm serious. I really like you. Just give me a chance. Okay? She gazed at me earnestly, and with a face like hers, I could see why any man would struggle to say no. But just as I hesitated, a familiar voice cut through. Matthew, please, I know I messed up. It was all Jacob's doing. Can we just meet one last time? I'll dedicate myself to you. I promise we can get married. I couldn't believe Letitia had the audacity to show up here. She was only here because the public scrutiny forced her hand. There was no sincerity in her actions. I just wanted her to leave, to get out of my life for good. I walked toward the window, but Belinda clearly misunderstood. She quickly grabbed my wrist and, before I could react, pushed me down. Stop looking at her. Look at me instead. Let me love you. I'm serious about this. As our eyes locked, I felt myself teetering on the edge of temptation. In that moment, Letitia faded from my mind, and I could only marvel at the serendipity that brought me here. In the end, Belinda and I ended up together. I couldn't help but ask her what it was about me that attracted her, considering the entertainment industry was full of handsome, charming faces. She replied with conviction, "It's that unique, sharp edge of yours. There's something about your brooding demeanor that gets to me.